I lied about losing the baby years ago to keep cheating. He burned everything to the ground. Hello, Reddits. My name is Emma, and my life is a mess currently. I don't know what to do or how to get past this. It's all my fault, I know, but I really want to fix this, if I can. I lied. I lied to my husband that I lost our baby 4 years ago just so I could keep cheating on him. And when he found out, he burned everything to the ground. I mean everything, and left nothing at all untouched, both emotionally and physically. I know how much Rick values family, and how much he hates lies of any sort. And instead of respecting that, I did otherwise. I had committed the 3 greatest offenses in his books. I cheated, lied, and ruined our chance of creating a family together. Rick and I have been married for 10 years now, and it would have been the 11th year in 3 months. But there's a very high chance of 0 celebrations because of what I have done. I met Steve, the guy I cheated on Rick with, right after I met Rick. He was my junior colleague at work, and he was a quite bright chap who caught the eye of everyone in the office with his easygoing smiles and his jobs well done. I was never attracted to him from the beginning because he was much younger than me, and I was also his boss, so I paid no attention to anything other than his skills. But because of my work, which required a lot of traveling, and because most times I had to travel with my subordinates, the times I had to spend with Steve were more frequent than was necessary. It didn't help that he was good at his job too, so we were always pushed to work together at work. Rick had never minded that I traveled a lot, and he had been used to it over the years, and he also had to travel a lot, even more than I did for work, because he's the CEO. But we understood that, and it had never been in the way of argument before. We got married pretty early at the age of 22, both young and excited for our new life. Rick had started up his own company with the inheritance he got from his father in cash, and had built something big and internationally recognized. I, on the other hand, had grown through the career ladder faster than you can say jack. Within the space of 2 years after marriage, Rick and I owned our massive mansion and different cars for different uses, and we had everything we could ever want or need. But then came the difficult part. I wasn't getting pregnant no matter how much we tried, and I didn't even have a false alarm, not even once. My menstrual period never misses its time, coming earlier than expected every month. We even went for checkups, and we were declared compatible and medically fit to have children, but still nothing. For 5 whole years of our marriage, we kept going round and round the same issue until I got really tired. I was exhausted by the wait and desperation of waiting for a baby, and it just would upset me so much seeing Rick so unhappy because of it. His parents had separated while he was young, and he had somehow ended up in an orphanage at the age of 12, so he had craved having a family of his own since then, and I understood despite the fact that I had my parents who still lived together and love each other despite many years of doing so. I wanted to have that family with him. But all that changed when Steve came into the picture. He was always extra around me, always trying to impress me and always noticing things about me, like a new haircut, a new dress, or something else. But I never thought of it to mean something else until a friend who worked in another department in the same company had pointed it out. And I did notice everything he did, but noticing should have had me calling him and re-announcing the fact that I was happily married. Instead, I indulged him, watching him watch me, and my dresses became even more provocative by the day. It didn't help matters that Rick was out of town for over a week for work, and it gave me more time to shop for dresses that I usually would frown against wearing, even though it was the usual trend. I guess being noticed by another man who wasn't Rick just pleased me so much that I ended up sleeping with him for the first time that evening at the office. I cannot remember exactly what had led to it. Maybe it was the flirty wink I gave him that afternoon, or perhaps the dress I wore, which barely covered my thigh. I only remember trying to reach for a pen, and my dress had ripped because of its tightness, and the situation became awkward but eventually turned naughty when Steve had reached for the pen and driven it further away on the desk from me. It all turned into some sort of silly game until I was no longer conscious of my ripped dress and was right in his arms, twisting and turning in different directions to get comfortable on an office chair having sex. I should have felt guilty, but for some weird reason I never did. I felt like I needed to have the sex to relieve all the tension of not being able to have a baby, and I hadn't even blinked when I saw Rick's car parked outside the garage. Even when I went in and he noticed the suit tied around my waist, I still didn't panic. I had only said that my clothes ripped, and I borrowed the suit my boss left in the office to cover up. Rick didn't doubt me because he knew me. Well, he thought he did, and apparently I thought I did too, because the "I'm crazily in love with Rick" me wouldn't have done what I did. But I discovered that I did still love Rick very much, but being with Steve that first night, having wild and dangerous sex, was just thrilling for me. So I continued. I continued seeing Steve after that day. We would sneak out of the office for our lunch break just to go to his apartment, which was closer to the office, to have sex, and we met after work too, many times for the same thing. We met on weekends with the excuse of work just to have sex, and it was pretty wild, and I thought of it as satisfying. I couldn't bear it when I didn't see Steve for more than 2 days because of how addicted I was to how much things he was willing to teach me during sex. But then, after about 2 months of being with Steve, I found out I was pregnant. I knew that the baby definitely belonged to Rick because Steve had been out of town the day I conceived the baby. He had to work with a different team for a week-long project. So throughout that week, I slept with Rick alone, and there was no doubt it was Rick's. I hadn't even decided what to do with the baby when Rick found out through his friend who was our family doctor. Apparently, he thought I told Rick the good news already and was only just congratulating him. Rick was so happy and started making plans for the baby. He marked out kindergartens, started shopping for baby clothes, shoes, and even toys, and apparently was so happy that he was getting the family he had always wanted. I should have been happy after waiting for over 5 years just to have the baby, but I wasn't. Being pregnant meant all the illnesses that came with it, and there was the fact that my face would become bloated every time, and I would have to take a maternity leave from work. And finally, there was the fact that Steve wouldn't find me attractive. He said it once when I asked him if he was still going to stick with me. But he refused, saying he could never be with a pregnant woman, so I knew that Steve was going to stop sleeping with me immediately when he found out about the baby. So I kept it to myself and had secretly gone for a pre-scheduled appointment with another doctor for an abortion. I had complications during the surgical procedure and almost bled to death, but I survived. Luckily, Rick was out of town again for work. When I went to the hospital again, a different one for a checkup, I found out that I could never have a child of my own from the severe complications caused by the abortion. I never told Rick that, though. I left him to keep expecting a child because I couldn't exactly tell him the reason why I decided to get rid of the baby was to continue an affair with a junior colleague at work. And after the loss of the baby, Rick was really never the same. I lied to him that I lost the baby when I tripped on something at home, and although Rick was so sad about it, it almost made me feel guilty. I still was able to suppress the guilt and continue with the affair. It was so addicting. That feeling of ecstasy I kept getting from all the sex we were having, coupled with the fact that it was something I shouldn't be caught doing, made it even more fun. The afternoon meetings in my office, the late nights spent working, and the whole lot of trips all kept it alive. But then Steve had just disappeared after a year of being my lover. I heard from our boss that he had asked to be transferred away to another branch, and I was really upset. No calls or anything to even apologize or give me reasons for just leaving like that. The problem was I couldn't share my frustration with anyone because no one would understand me, or my reasons for being upset. I wasn't in love with Steve or anything like that. I just loved the little thing we had between us. And I knew it wouldn't last, but I had somehow believed that I would probably be the one to end things if there was any need to. And when he left, there really was no need to. Rick was still believing that I was the faithful wife he married, and that we both shared the desperation of having a child. I got a replacement soon, though. It was still with a colleague at work, but this time, we both were chief managers of our various departments. Eric was never noticeable before with his big-shaped glasses and his baggy trousers, and he was well known for his contributions to the company, though always mocked about his silly dressing style. I had even mocked him several times before with my friends. But then we had to work together on a particular proposal, which was important to the company, and that was how we got close. Eric, clearly shy, especially on the matters of women, would blush at everything I said. It was very easy to seduce Eric into sleeping with me, and I only meant to tease him at first, but eventually it really became something real, and the pattern I had started with Steve continued with Eric. The company thought we only did good jobs together and kept giving us more work to do together, which gave us even more time to travel together. We would leave our teams behind and travel in order to get a feel of the project. Meanwhile, we spent our time exploring each other's bodies more than we did with the project. I taught Eric everything that Steve taught me, and it continued like that for years, nobody suspecting anything between us, not even Eric's wife that he eventually got married to while we're still together. And Rick kept wishing for a child between us, and I kept deceiving him, knowing that I would never have one for him. But even when he suggested adoption, I refused, and had even turned it into a bigger issue than it should have been. I also refused surrogacy and in vitro fertilization, anything that had to do with having a child other than the natural way. And I also stopped visiting the doctor for a checkup. I already knew what was wrong with me, and I knew going for a checkup would reveal that secret, so I kept stalling and turning everything into arguments just to get out of it. Eric's wife got pregnant in their first year of marriage, and that was when it started to hit me really badly, the things I did. I was jealous of her for getting so pregnant easily, and Eric was 2 years younger than Rick and I, and so was his wife. It made it all the more painful that I couldn't get a child when I desperately wanted one while I was at her age. The guilt started to kick in, but not enough to stop me from still seeing Eric. I didn't want that feeling of ecstasy to end, and between Rick and I traveling around and barely having time for each other, or rather me not making the time because of my affair with Eric. But I guess nothing lasts forever. Certainly not an affair, because karma certainly doesn't sit around and wait while you regret your actions and repent. Because Sam found out, and in the most horrible way possible, and his reaction had been 10 times more worse than I anticipated or expected. Eric had set up our meeting time as usual and texted me saying he missed me. He wanted to spend a day with me and had asked me to make excuses from my husband. I was pretty excited because a week before that day, Eric had been avoiding me and wouldn't speak to me or see me except if it was about work. I got really worried because I was missing having a good time, and I kept texting but no response. But then that text really uplifted my mood, and I went to get prepared with my usual lie set in place. What I didn't know was that Rick had found out about my secret meeting with Eric. He was in the sitting room and had heard my phone beeped indicating a text. And I had been stupid to leave my phone carelessly, and also forget the fact that Rick knew my passwords even though he never did use them. I had thought it was silly to change my password when I started seeing other people, especially knowing that Rick would never suspect me enough to go through my messages. I went to meet Eric, and truly everything was wonderful. He was apologizing for leaving me on hold. Apparently his wife started to suspect something. She got a text from me around midnight, and his wife had almost picked the phone up to check the message, but he had been quick to act and had snatched the phone right out of her hand and then proceeded to stay faithful through the week. I enjoyed the whole day with Eric doing what we usually would do, but this time was quite different because I never knew that we were being watched and that every moment was being captured. When I finally got home, Rick was home and didn't travel like I expected, but there was something different about him. He didn't talk to me or anything. He just stared at me and refused to answer my questions. Thinking he was just in one of those moods, I left him to himself and went into the room to shower and change my dress. Rick didn't say anything about my infidelity at first. He had known about it for weeks, but he kept gathering his facts. And then something terrible happened. Rick decided to host a party for my birthday. I didn't want to celebrate it, but Rick kept insisting on planning and calling everyone to come for my birthday party. I thought he was just being thoughtful, as he always has been, so I agreed to it. The party happened 3 days after, and I didn't even need to do anything because Rick put everything into place, organizing everything perfectly well. I only just had to show up at the restaurant he booked for the party and smile and accept the birthday wishes and gifts. Or so I thought. Everything started out really well, and I even got a cake and even a birthday present, but then someone shockingly showed up at my party. I never thought that my past would end up catching up to me, but it did in the most awful way possible. The doctor that diagnosed me with infertility was there at my party, and he was hugging and shaking my husband's hand like they knew each other well. Oh, they did actually. Apparently the doctor and Rick grew up together. He was invited to the party by a friend of theirs who they had just reconnected with. When the doctor walked up to me to wish me a happy birthday, I prayed desperately that he didn't recognize me. But as fate would have it, he did. He asked me immediately if I was still trying for a baby, and if I had gone to a hospital after that day for another checkup. Rick was confused, but he pretended to understand what was going on, and he asked questions like he did understand. His friend, probably thinking it had been a joint decision from both of us to get rid of the baby, kept talking and had mentioned the abortion and why it risked my life and the complications afterwards. Rick was so angry. In fact, I have never seen him that way in all our years of marriage. He looked so angry I feared that he would hit me hard in front of everyone, but he had done none of that. Instead, Rick had brought out his phone and sent a message. I knew he did when everyone's phones beeped at once, including mine, and I quickly checked to see what he had sent everyone. Turned out to be pictures of Eric and I entering and leaving the hotel holding hands and smiling like lovers. Another had actually contained one of us kissing passionately, and the last one was of Eric and I having sex. I was as shocked as everyone else there when I saw it, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't ever imagine that Rick would ever find out about my affair. He smiled bitterly and told me that it was his birthday present. I tried to talk to Rick. I didn't have anything to say. I just didn't want him to leave when he tried to. But Rick had pushed my hand away from him like it was disgusting. And then he asked me if it was because of my lover, so I decided to abort our child. I couldn't lie again. Everything was out in the open. There was no other lie I could tell, so I just simply nodded, and Rick had just sucked in a breath and then left. Amidst the disgusting looks and not-so-low whispers of how horrible everyone thought I was able to get away from the restaurant and head home. I was desperate to get Rick to listen to me. It was like my brain was becoming rewired at that moment. I couldn't stand losing Rick. Not after everything we shared. But when I managed to get home, I was shocked to find a very horrifying situation. Rick was dragging everything out and pouring them out into an already blaring fire. Everything we shared, everything we bought together, our wedding album, our wedding gifts, and even the baby stuff that he bought when he found out I was pregnant, were all going into the fire. He was also burning my clothes, everything he bought me, bags, shoes, jewelries. There really wasn't anything that was left. He burned everything, and I just stood there and watched him. I didn't even know I was crying until a sob had escaped my mouth when I saw him look at me with that hard look in his eyes, and then toss his wedding ring into the fire. I couldn't believe what was happening, and there was no way of stopping it. When Rick was satisfied that everything was well into the fire and couldn't be fixed or repaired anymore, he left me standing there and went in, locking the door right after him. I tried to get him to open the door. I cried, and I begged him to listen to me. I apologized, screaming my lungs out, telling him I still loved him and didn't want to lose him. But Rick didn't even budge. Not when I kept banging the door, or even when I stayed outdoors all night. I woke up with a start right outside the door when I saw security guards walk up to me and told me to leave because the neighbors had complained about my noise in the night. I had no choice but to leave. I had nothing and nowhere to go. Everything that was mine that was inside the house, Rick had burned everything just to ensure I understood that he wasn't giving me a second chance. Thankfully, I had the company card with me, so I was able to rent a room in a hotel and buy some clothes so I could change into something different from my ruined dress and makeup from the previous night. I decided to go over to my parents' place, forgetting that they were both there at the party and that Rick had sent them the pictures too. My dad was so furious when I showed up, and he ordered me out without allowing me to even go into the house at all. I tried to apologize, but Dad wasn't listening. Mom just sat there and stared at me with a blank look on her face, and it was obvious what that look was saying. I have no daughter, because no daughter of mine would do what you did to your husband. When it became evident that my parents wouldn't budge or let me in, I went back to the hotel I was staying in, and then I got a call from my boss that he wanted me to hand over my resignation letter and the company's card that Monday. I had forgotten that some of my colleagues were there at the party and had witnessed everything. They must have told my boss and even showed him evidence of 2 workers frolicking around despite the company's rules against it, and he was firing me because of it. Everything was just turning upside down faster than I could blink. My boss must have delivered the same message to Eric, because he called me, and when I wouldn't pick his calls, he texted me, and his text sounded like he typed in a state of panic because of the different typo errors in them. I didn't even care about him, so I just ignored the calls and the texts he sent. What, or rather who, I cared about, wants nothing to do with me, and that was my major concern. not my so-called friends who were rapidly blocking me on social media. One had even taken the pictures online, and I wouldn't even talk about the negative popularity I've been having since that day. What I'm majorly concerned about is what Rick thinks of me. I'm desperate for his forgiveness, guys. I really cannot live without him. Do you guys think I have an opportunity, even if it's the slightest one, to get Rick to forgive me and accept me back despite everything I've done? I regret it, yes, and I know I will spend my life paying for it, but I really would be content suffering if I still had Rick in my life. Update. Hello, Reddits. This is my second post here. It's been roughly 8 weeks since the first time I posted here to ask for some sort of advice. I know. I'm sure most of you don't expect me back here, especially not after what I did or what you've said, but here I am again. It's really so hard surviving after the chaos that had ruined my entire life. It's really hard surviving without Rick. Rick, my ever-understanding husband who had always supported me and rooted for me. Rick, who had always listened while I rambled about my frustrations from work. Rick never started up an argument, and when I did start up one, he would always look for a way to settle things between us without any sort of violence. Rick, who carried on loving me for years, despite my childless state. He didn't even try to have a baby with a different woman, and he kept trying for us to have our baby without knowing the horrible thing I had done to our child. I wonder how grown the child would be now. They will probably be 6 years old now, bright and bubbly and probably with Rick's hair and character. I had always wanted my child to inherit Rick's eyes too, and if they did, it would have been a perfect baby. We would be a family, a normal and happy one, but I ruined every chance of that ever happening because of my selfish acts. I thought I could get away with the sins I was committing. I even got greedy enough to be involved with 2 different men who were not my husband. What was I thinking? How could I have been so stupid to think that I would survive the storm if it came as a result of my actions? Why did I think I could ever get away with everything I did to Rick? I don't know what to think or say of myself. You all have said it all. You've called me different names. Ones that I've had to get a dictionary to understand its shocking meanings, and ones that I never thought I would ever get called, not in this life or the next if there's one. You've cruelly made your opinion on how you think of me and my delusional beliefs that I could get back with Rick passed across in the most disturbing ways. I know I deserve it all, but it really doesn't still make it any less painful. It hurts knowing that despite pouring my heart out here and explaining what I thought was reason enough to have cheated, not once but twice on my marriage, you guys think far worse of me. Far worse than the people who never got any explanations from me, but just assumed the worst from the evidence they saw. It's all my fault. It really is all my fault. I could have done better. I could have never cheated on Rick. He never treated me wrongly before. He was nice, kind, and patient. He loved me in the way no one had ever loved me before, but yet all I ever did was betray that love and trust we were supposedly supposed to share. I did nothing but hurt him through the 10 years of being married, and I'm so ashamed of myself. I feel horrible. I cannot stop thinking about the squeezed expression on Rick's face when he heard from his friend exactly what I had done to our baby, when he realized that I've lied to him for years about it, when he realized that everything I have ever said and done were all lies. I remember the look on his face when he looked at me and threw his wedding ring into that fire. I remember everything, and they make my chest squeeze really tight in constricting pain. To him, I've ceased existing. I've become someone he used to know, someone he hates so much and cannot bear seeing, someone who had squashed his dreams of having a family, someone who lied for so many years without an iota of guilt. To him, I'm a monster who deserves everything coming to her, and that evidence is lying in the document right on top of my little drawer with his signature on it. I know I do not deserve a second chance. I ruined everything and definitely should suffer for ruining everything that Rick spent our lives together building. My life is now nothing. It's like I have been completely erased from the lives of the people that once couldn't do without me. At work, a replacement was found almost immediately, and then my friends also found a new replacement for me. Even my family wouldn't contact me or talk to me. It's almost like I never really had any use for these people. None of them wants to be associated with me, not after what I've done. I understand their decisions truly, but it still makes it all the more painful because I gave them the chance to replace me. I made myself into a dirt that needed trashing, and there's nothing else I regret more than doing so. especially with Rick. I wish I had never lied to, or better still, I wish I had never done anything that would have caused me to lie to him the way I had done. Now, I'm everything that I have never prayed to be. It's now I stupidly remember my aunt, who I never met, because her family cut her off completely. When I was younger, my mom would tell me never to become like my aunt, but I didn't understand then what she meant. But sadly, I do now, perfectly. I understand that being replaced is easy, particularly when you think you can cheat your way through everything or even one thing. Because at the end, you could end up losing everything, both the ones you didn't cheat for and the ones you did cheat for. I cheated on Rick, and yet I lost him and everything else. Now, I'm completely and utterly alone with no one, absolutely no one on my side. Rick was the best part of my life. He was stable, and he was my home, my comfort and my peace, my reality and my reliability. But instead of cherishing everything that he represented and guarding him to my heart, I did the exact opposite. And I cannot say this enough, but there really is nothing I regret more than that. Every day I go to sleep thinking that I would wake up and everything would be the same again. Same routine with our bedside alarm waking us up. Then we would have breakfast together before taking our bath, which was always longer than it should be. And we would end up rushing through the rest so I don't get late for work. And Rick, even though he didn't have to rush, he still did, so I didn't feel alone while rushing for my shoes or bags when we both made me late. And then I would come home in the evening when Rick was around to a bunch of flowers and a romantic dinner and a massage afterwards after listening to my rants about work. Rick presented everything I should have been satisfied with. There was nothing more I could have asked for, but apparently I was too selfish and greedy for something that never was mine for the taking. It's such a sad feeling like this. I'm sure the guys I cheated on Rick with are not going through as much pain as I am right now. Even though Eric eventually texted me days later after that day to tell me his wife was filing for divorce and she and their baby wanted nothing to do with him. I feel sorry and guilty because I did that to him. I seduced him, and now he's also on the outs because of me. I've ended up ruining not only one but 2 lives, and perhaps 3 if I knew anything about Steve's current situation. It feels really unbearable having to live with this pressing weight of guilt. It feels so choking. Update. Hello, Reddits. It's me again, and this is my last post here. It's been almost 8 months now. It's funny how fast time seems to be going, but certainly not on my own end. It's almost like everyone in the world is moving on except me, and I'm stuck indefinitely in the past and can't find a way out of it. Everyone seems to have a new life or something, and if the picture that Rick posted on his social media was anything to go by, he also found a replacement for me too. The lady he was holding by the waist was smiling up at him with stars in her eyes, and Rick was also looking down at her, smiling exactly the same way. I saved the picture just so I can torture myself with it every day, to remind myself what I had but lost because of my selfishness, and to remind myself that I'm totally replaceable. I should have known that from the beginning, so I wouldn't have been tempted to do the things that I did. The comments underneath that post confirmed further my suspicions. They were wishing them a great life, congratulating Rick for moving on from the past, which is definitely me. Each word, each comment felt like a jab by the side, a painful one. It's more like a reaffirmation that everything good that I've lost, I will never gain back. And that hurts like crazy. I've woken up midway in the night from the horrible nightmares that now taunt me every night, searching desperately for Rick's comforting arms, but finding nothing. And then, as a reminder that I pushed him away, I stare at that picture and cry until morning. It's so hard having to live like this, having to live with this unending guilt that seems like a permanent feature in my life now. I cannot tell how long I have to live like this, probably for the rest of my life, but it's just dreadful thinking about it. It's been 8 months, and yet it feels like I'm still reliving that day that Rick had found out about it. And there's the fact that I have to deal with every day, that he's with another woman, a woman that isn't me, and that will probably cherish him and never do the things I did to lose him. If I ever had to go back in time, the 2 things I would change is allowing Steve into my life as far enough as to make me think that the perfect decision was getting rid of my baby, and I would also have never thought to get together with Eric. If I ever had a chance to do things over, I would have chosen to stay faithful and would have stuck to being Rick's lover and wife. I would never have done anything to jeopardize our future together. And I know this sounds like gibberish to you guys, especially because you guys hate me, but it is how I feel. And since this is my last post here, I just want to beg you guys never to become like me. Never take the person who loves you wholeheartedly for granted. Never think that you can gamble between love and an affair, because the end, I tell you, is me. And I sure as hell never wish you guys would end up the way I have. All I can tell you is that this excruciating pain that I go through permanently every day in my life isn't exactly a walk in the park. Thanks and goodbye.